Hey guys, how's it going? It's Ask Jake, and today I'm going to talk to you about one of the craziest jobs I've ever had. I'm sure you already know what it is because of the title of this, but if you're squeamish, if you don't want to hear about sensitive stuff like autopsies, then definitely don't watch this video. So I am going to go into a little bit of detail. Just wanted to warn you. Okay, so sometimes I call myself a Jake of all trades because I have done so many different kinds of jobs. I was a farmhand back in Iowa. I was a youth ministries associate. I was an actor in Los Angeles. I was a waiter, of course. I was a Arabic linguist in the Air Force, and now I'm a car salesman. But one of the craziest jobs I ever did was I was an autopsy technician for the Iowa State Medical Examiner. Well, an autopsy technician is basically the person who eviscerates the organs during an autopsy. I removed all the organs for the doctor to examine and diagnose what was the cause of death. So I didn't do the autopsy as in diagnose, but I did take out all the organs and give them to the doctor to take a look at. So that's what an autopsy technician is. I was an autopsy technician from May 2006 to September 2006, again at the Iowa State Medical Examiner's office. The reason I jumped into that was because basically I was a pre-med student in college, and I thought my goal was going to be a surgeon. And my dad was in the law enforcement of Iowa, the state of Iowa, and so he had some connections to the Iowa State Medical Examiner's office, and he was talking to somebody and they had a job opening, and so I had just finished my first year of college and I needed a summer job, and so I went and applied. Well, the interview was very different, as you can imagine. This is totally different than anything else I've ever done. But I was 18. I went in, obviously professional attire and everything like that, but the questions started to get much deeper very quickly. You know, they started to ask, how would you handle yourself seeing a dead body? And I said, well, obviously it would be kind of shocking the first time. Of course, I've seen grandparents, you know, who've passed away and their caskets and things like that. So I've seen dead bodies before, but obviously these are going to be different. And they said, yeah, these are going to be different. I mean, how are you going to handle seeing a gunshot wound to the head or a dead baby? And I said, well, I mean, first of all, I would just try to approach it scientifically and really try to keep my emotions out of it, because we're there to do a job to figure out what was the cause of death. So I would try to approach it very scientifically, and you know, I think I would be fine. And then they were like, "You would be fine seeing a dead baby? You sick?" And I said, I dropped my jaw, and they were like, "We're just messing with you." No, yeah, you had a good answer. You're right. Which, that was a big shock to like the humor and the kind of the dark humor that goes on in jobs like law enforcement and, you know, medicine and things like that. Like, there's just a different way of thinking about it. So yeah, they were kind of teasing me and kind of trying to shake me up, but that was one of the questions. They said that to me. So they said that. Then they were asking me questions like, you know, how do you deal with stress? If you answer something like, I drink, then that probably wouldn't be very good for this job. So bottom line is, I got through all the interview questions and I got the job. Okay, so the first thing that was, you know, getting acclimated to being an autopsy technician was all the protective equipment. You had scrubs, then you had this sort of like splash guard that you put on, kind of like a Snuggie almost. And then you had like a plastic apron, and you had booties on your shoes, and you had a hairnet on, and then you also had a mask. And you could do a surgeon mask, or you could do this thick mask that was protecting against hepatitis C and other airborne diseases. And then you had the gloves. And so you had a pair of like really thin surgical gloves, and then you had a pair of Kevlar gloves, and then a pair of sort of regular rubber gloves on top of that. And the Kevlar gloves were there to protect you from slices, but they didn't protect you from stabbing. And one time I was doing an autopsy with somebody, and she put the syringe in to pull out blood from the femoral artery, and it's a little bit like a vacuum in there. Sometimes there's just air, and it's just not, it doesn't come out normal. So it's like a plunger almost, and it slipped out of her hand, and she accidentally pushed it back into her hand and stabbed herself with the needle that was just in the dead body. So she had to go right away to get on some sort of like medicine protocol to prevent any sort of bloodborne diseases, like AIDS and hepatitis B and things like that. So that was scary. And even with all that protective equipment on, you still can, have accidents and things that expose you to the diseases in bodies. And then there's the mask. So I wore the hepatitis C mask all the time, because not just because it was going to protect me, but because it was thicker, and I didn't want to smell everything that was going on in that room. So that added just a little bit more of a buffer to the smell, but eventually you would just smell everything going on. It just didn't hit you like if you were wearing just the thin surgical mask. There was this one guy there that he had been doing it for like 20 years or something like that, and he barely even hooked his surgical mask on. Like, it was like flapping at the bottom. It was like barely covering his mouth, and yeah, he just had been through so much stuff. He just didn't care. I don't even think he wore goggles. I think he just wore his regular reading glasses, and definitely didn't wear the three gloves and stuff like that. So it was crazy. But yeah, tons of protective equipment. I felt like I was going to the moon. And then that's what led me up to my first body. So I still remember the first body that I ever worked on very vividly, because, well, it's the first one. But I actually remember pretty well almost all the bodies that I did work on. But this guy, I can just remember, like, came in on the gurney in a body bag, unzipped the body bag, and there's this guy, maybe mid to late 50s, kind of like gray hair, but really, really, really blue eyes. I just remember those blue eyes. They were, and then I just thought to myself, I was just like, this person was just alive like 3 hours ago. And now he's here, and we're trying to cut inside him to figure out what happened and what went wrong. It just was mind blowing. Like, just made me feel like so small in the world of things, because like this person was just alive and now he's not. And then, we put him on the table where we do the autopsy, and they show me how to eviscerate the brain, because believe it or not, that's actually one of the first ones that you learn how to do, the first organs that you learn how to do, because it's not too difficult to remove it. So you would make an incision behind the ear, go over the top of the head, and come back behind the ear, because it's easier to hide those things when when the body is gone to the morgue, and they dress the body for the funeral. Well, they need to hide those cuts that you make. So you go behind the ear, back over here, and then you actually pull the skin down, and you like take away all the cartilage and the stuff that attaches your scalp to your skull. Pull it down, and it goes down like over their nose. So all you see is just like the top of their skull and like a flap of skin over their face. And you pull the same one down in the back, and then you take a bone saw and you saw across the forehead, and then you make a little notch, and then you saw the rest off. And you got to be careful not to go too deep, because then you can buzz the brain. But eventually the cap of the skull comes off, and then you set it to the side, and hopefully you've done it right, so that you can literally like reach in and start to pull the brain out and just kind of peel it off out of its shell. And then you cut the spinal cord at the bottom, and you pull everything out, and there you have a brain in your hands. And I remember seeing the brain in my hand for the first time, and it just felt like a movie. This like I just saw this like camera zoom in on this, and I thought to myself, like, this thing is what makes a person alive for their whole life. This from before they're out of the womb to the day they die, this thing is working, it's on, it's controlling everything in their body. And obviously there's other major organs, but this one in my hands has that spark, has that electric life in it. And I was holding it in my hand, and it was like just otherworldly almost. And so once I had taken the brain out, I gave it to the doctor, and then I find out there's other little things inside the skull, like the pituitary gland, which is on the inside behind your nose. You had to remove that, and then you just go throughout the body. You just cut all the way through, and take out all the other organs. And I'm not going to go all the way into it, but the brain and that first body was like just made me feel really small, and also how big like God is, how complicated a brain is, that it can be alive and working every day, every second of your life, from before you were born to the day you die. It's on, and there's an electric like pulse in there that just keeps it going. And I don't know, just blows my mind still thinking about it. So that was my first one, but there were many more after that. Throughout the 6 months that I did it, I probably worked on an average of a body every day or every other day. So probably about 4 bodies a week I would work. And you would see everything from like a car accident to suicide, hanging or gunshot, and heart attacks. And but one thing I really remember is that I felt like I could see innocence and I could see evil. And I don't know if you all believe in that, but like, we had to do an autopsy on a baby one time because the state medical examiner does autopsies on anything that's unnatural, an unnatural death. So like older people who are just dying of natural causes, they wouldn't need an autopsy unless maybe the family requested it. But anything else that's unnatural, you would get an autopsy for. So when babies die suddenly in the nursery or whatever, then they get an autopsy to see what went wrong. So there was a baby there, and it just was so innocent. I mean, I just couldn't believe that it wasn't alive, and you just think about, again, how fragile life is. And then on the other extreme, there was literal evil, where this guy that was dead, obviously, but he was this kind of like anarchist guy. So he didn't cut his hair, he didn't cut his nails, he didn't trim his yard, and somehow he had a girlfriend. So he got it in his mind that he was going to kill her, and then he killed himself. He shot her with a shotgun, and then he put the shotgun in his mouth and took the top of his head off. And nobody checked on him. Nobody knew that they had died. And it was like weeks before the smell got out the house. And then somebody went and checked, and they found them. But, when we got them, they were very much decomposing. And, I could just see that the female, like, she was murdered, and he was the one who did it, and then he took his own life. And I don't know if I should even describe it to you on YouTube, how his body looked, but like there was maggots everywhere, there was flies, like unzipping the bag, the maggots had turned into flies, so there were flies in the bag, and then when you unzip it, they get out into the room that you're working in, and they're buzzing around, and you just know that they were born in this guy's body. And so that was just like, you just felt a vibe of just evil in that guy. And I don't know, it was a really weird experience. And there was that whole spectrum, from the innocence of the baby to that guy, and then everything in between. People who committed suicide, like, just seeing this as them at the end of their life, like what was happening in their life right before this happened, before they came to see us, what was going on in their life, you know? So that was one huge thing about that job, was just having to deal with the spectrum of people, you know, in places of their lives and conditions that they were in. So it was only a 6-month job, but after that, I moved to Los Angeles and I started my acting career. But I learned a lot about myself, like how to kind of compartmentalize different emotions and different thoughts and things, how to be a professional around others who were, you know, taking their job very seriously. I mean, I was 18 and I needed to definitely act my age or older to be in that environment. But I think some of the biggest things I took away from that were that life is fragile. You know, like I said, like the brain, there's just something inside it that's God-given that makes it work and makes it alive, and it can be gone really quickly. And that the heart and the brain and the lungs, they all work together, but none of them would work together without that touch from God, that spark that gets them going and keeps them going, you know, for the rest of somebody's life. So I think that's the biggest thing I took away from it, that life is fragile, and also that suicide is not the answer. You know, I think that's a huge thing going on right now, and I've seen the end of a suicide. You know, I've seen that everybody looks the same on the inside. When you peel back the skull and when you open up the chest and you look inside at the organs, everybody looks very much the same. And, you know, some people choose to end their lives because they don't feel like they have any other choice, or maybe they feel like they're the only ones going through what they're going through. But we're all the same on the inside. We have different experiences, but, you know, we need to make sure we look out for each other because we're all made of the same stuff. And suicide is not the answer, and don't give up. Kind of got off on a tangent there. So there you go, guys. I told you it was going to be kind of gruesome. If you're squeamish, don't watch. But I'm going to make a few more videos about the other things that I've done, like my acting career, my linguist career in the Air Force. And, you know, if you like them, leave comments. If you have more questions, I guess, leave comments and give me a thumbs up. Thanks so much. See you.